Hello and welcome back to the Fight and Talk 2 podcast with myself, Mr. Fight and Talk, joined as always by the fantastic co-hosts, Mr. Prath and Mr. George, both looking extremely tired after a very long night of fights. George, how you doing, mate?
All good, mate. How are you?
Very good. A little bit tired. Prath, how you doing?
Managed to function my day off a 3 hours sleep, but we run it.
Good man, good man. So it wasn't an amazing set of fights from the prelims all the way up. Obviously, the opening fight, we had Amir Al-Bazi fighting out of London Shoot Fighters. I thought he looked really good. He looked really good on the feet, and he was catching him with the jab all the time. He managed his distance very well. He came in, got some fantastic takedowns, and he managed to just, he did enough to win the fight. Do you know what I mean? George, you're obviously asleep at this time, but Prath, what did you see?
I just thought it was a clean fight. He did very, very well. Obviously, I can't remember which round I gave it to the other gentleman whose name we will never butcher. But he did good. And I don't know if was that his debut?
It was actually his second fight in the UFC, and he's already ranked 15. So you can tell he's going to be a definite prospect on the way up here.
Yeah, man, love to see some homegrown talent do well, and pressure was good. I liked his distance management. I think there are going to be improvements that are going to be shown, but for your second fight in, I just think the pressure of it all will kind of make or break you. So to see him come through with flying colors and get that W is very awesome.
Absolutely, and his story as well. Obviously, he's from Iraq, and then he fled to Syria with his family and stuff. And then obviously a lot of Syrian refugees move over to Sweden because they take a lot of people in, which is fantastic of the country as well. And then naturally he came over to London and then fell in love with MMA, which is fantastic. And he's got a fantastic story. He's a lovely guy, and fingers crossed we'll get him on the channel soon. And then Prath, what was your next kind of fight that you really enjoyed on the card? Obviously, as we said, the prelims were a little bit flat for me. We had Frivola getting completely destroyed. Nick Lentz looked very good as well, but obviously he didn't get the W. He wore a lot of the punches on his face as well. What kind of caught your eye on the prelims?
Yeah, no, I've got to agree with the Nick Lentz one. I think he's got that same kind of stigma that the Diaz guys have, where if he just gets a little bit of damage, he cuts open very, very easily, and it just looks like a bloodbath. And I think maybe to his deficit, unfortunately, when the judges are looking at that and looking at the amount of damage he's taken, they're swinging it the other way. So, but I also agree he did a fantastic in that fight, and we don't know where we'll see Nick Lentz go. I think we mentioned before on the breakdown show that Nick Lentz was 40 plus fights into his career. So, love to see him maybe take a few more of those lower rank ones and see how he goes from there. But in terms of myself, the prelim fight that really caught my eye, that I really enjoyed, was the Juliana Pena versus Sarah Mcmahon fight. Both incredibly top, they're at the top of their division. They're both fantastic grapplers. Sarah Mcmahon, obviously, with that Olympic pedigree. Juliana Pena coming off of the Ultimate Fighter. She has a lot of submission wins on her record as well. And I think it was incredibly impressive to watch Juliana Pena work someone like Sarah Mcmahon, take her down and control her, and then take the back very, very slowly, very, very calculated. Some people just jump on the back when they get that position, where she was almost like kind of like fetal position, face down. I don't know if that's like almost like a turtle position. And she was on her back, and instead of just kind of trying to jump in and get the hooks in, she was taking her time with it, taking a few, letting off a few shots, see where the openings were going. Eventually gets the hooks in, eventually gets the rear naked choke, and submits Sarah McMahon, which is very unprecedented due to her Olympic background. So incredible to see Juliana Pena take that. I think maybe she called out Amanda Nunes after the fight. I think she was ranked number 8, ranked number 9.
Yeah.
So maybe a fight more of one of those topper echelon fighters, a Raquel Pennington, a Holly Holm. I'd love to see her fight one of those guys and maybe move herself into that picture, because I do believe that's one of the few fights that Amanda hasn't had.
Yeah, absolutely. But obviously, for me, I'm a massive Amanda Nunes fan, inside and outside of the octagon, what she's achieved, and obviously her GOAT status, destroying some of the absolute greats. For me, the female MMA divisions are they're dominated by these absolute monsters. Zhang Wei Li, Valentina Shevchenko, Amanda Nunes, these kind of ladies. These ladies are just a different breed, and there are levels to this, and I really feel that although women's MMA has really come up, these ladies are just a little bit shy of where they could be or where they should be to be fighting at that top kind of one or two fighters, you know. But absolutely, she completely grinded it out the whole fight, and it was a really fantastic performance from her as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out as well, we're still midway through the women's evolution of learning technique and getting that sharpness in the technique that we see in the men. Men have been, you know, in these professional fights for a very long time compared to the women who have only managed to come through in the last couple of years, especially in the UFC. So I think it's incredible when we watch women's fights that we're essentially watching the evolution of women's mixed martial arts technique and how it looks and how it will evolve over time. So when I really appreciate watching a Rose Namajunas, who you can see from her first fight in the UFC to now, the improvements are dynamic, and she's quick. Her hands are incredible. Her jiu-jitsu is incredible. Her jiu-jitsu was already incredible. So man, I really love watching the evolution of technique, and I especially love watching it when women are going crazy and beating the crap out of each other.
Absolutely, absolutely, man. But obviously, they need to have their hair back. You know, we've seen it so many times. They need to have nice, tight cane rows, or, you know, super deep plaits or something, because we've seen women fall foul to the loose hair and stuff like that, and it does obviously cause quite a big problem for them. But as you said, Rose Namajunas, she just shaves it all off, man. She just shaves it all off, and she just cracks straight on because she's that much into her craft that she doesn't want anything to kind of stop her from getting where she could be. And obviously on the fight card as well, we had, obviously I was a little bit upset when she took the L here, but Amanda Ribas obviously took a loss to Rodriguez, who she had a fantastic fight. She had an absolute fantastic fight. She managed her distance very well. She came in, she caught her with some very, very clean shots. Obviously Ribas's game plan going into that was to get it to the ground, get it to where she's comfortable, close in the distance, move straight to the ground, but she just couldn't get it. George, what did you see, man?
Yeah, I think everyone had Ribas winning this, didn't they? So kind of Marina Rodriguez was kind of this like unknown, like almost she was just going to turn up and get beaten. But I mean, she was super aggressive, like a super aggressive multi kind of fighter, and she looks pretty damn serious and pretty damn legit, I think, in that division. She, you know, she almost looks more ready than Ribas looks at the moment, and she could cause a problem as in a big fight now for sure. But I thought she looked great. She did well, I thought, in the first round. Sort of Ribas got her to the ground quite quickly, but kind of saw her way through that kind of first round, and then started to implement her side of the fight in the second round, and it paid off. You know, obviously Herb Dean almost stopped it, and then thought, no, carry on, and then yeah, she finished her off. But I think these two girls will come back together at some point. I can see them having some sort of fight further down the line where they, you know, because they're both, I know Rodriguez in her early 30s and Ribas is younger, but I think they're kind of destined to kind of meet again at some point further down the line. But yeah, in terms of Marina Rodriguez coming forwards, like, I guess a fight with Carla Esparza or Juliana has been kind of thrown around between all of us last night. Maybe something like that might come to pass. And for Ribas, I'm not entirely sure where she goes from here, but you know, she's still a legit contender, and they're both in for big years. But yeah, no, it was a great fight, and obviously an underdog taking a win on the main card,
which was quite prevalent throughout the whole card. You know, we saw a lot of underdogs take the wins yesterday, not only on last night's card, but over the past couple of cards we've had over the past couple of weeks. A lot of the underdogs are really coming through and showing the fans that they shouldn't be the underdogs. You know, this is why it's such a beautiful sport, because you could be a -500, you could be a +500 favorite, underdog, whatever it may be. You come out there, and if you get that clean shot, you get that sub, you get that takedown that leads to a sub, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the bookies have got for you. You just got to go out there and put on an absolute performance, you know. And some of these guys and girls are really, really putting the work in and showing the fans that they are not to be slept on, you know. Obviously, then the next fight up, we had Mirador versus Andrew Sanchez, which I felt was a lot closer than people expected it to be. Obviously, we were talking last night as well, you know, just who we should bet our money on or whatever. And I put a little wager on Mirador because inside the distance, you know, which I was getting very, very nervous about. George thankfully persuaded me to put a little wager on. It was only a couple of pounds. I'm not a crazy betsman, but Yeah, fair play to George, man. You spotted that. You knew he would get it done inside the distance. But Prath, I thought Sanchez did a lot better than people expected him to do. What did you see?
I think I'm going to leave the Mahmoud Muradov side to young George there on the other side. But I will say that Andrew Sanchez implemented a fantastic game while it lasted. I think he was making Muradov a little bit uncomfortable in there in terms of the distance. But man, he landed over Muradov, that is, landed over and over and over again. And I've got to credit Andrew Sanchez's chin as well. He took a lot of big shots there. But no, I'm going to hand it over to George now to give a glowing review of Mcmahon Muradov.
George, tell me, man.
Boys, I told you we'd knock him out. All you would about 6 minutes was laying into me. What's going on? About to lose my money. All this rubbish. And I was like, boys, just be patient. Don't worry about it. 3 from Uzbekistan is going to knock old El Dirty Sanchez out. Don't worry about it. And sure enough, I was 1000% right. He is scary, man. He is a killer inside of there, and he has got the all-round kind of skill set, I think, to be a real serious player in that division. And he's 19-1 in his last 20 fights. He hasn't lost a fight in 6 years. He's managed by Floyd Money Mayweather. He's based in Las Vegas, and he's got all of the necessary tools to make his way slowly but surely up the ladder, and to be a massive problem to some people. Also, I didn't realize until this morning, this guy is popular on social media as well, which goes a long way in this world. He's got 1.1 million followers on Instagram, which is a lot of people following him. So, yeah. But next time we have a bet and I say someone's going to knock somebody out, whack it all on, because clearly, although I'm about to get slaughtered in a little bit for some things, next time Mirador fights, bet the house on him.
Absolutely, but you also bet for Conor McGregor to win, but we'll get to that bit a little bit later.
We'll get on to that. Hang on, to be fair, so did you, but we'll get on to that, and I'll eat my humble pie later on, but I will not be eating any humble pie with Muradov. The guy's a killer, and watch out, he's coming.
No, he did do fantastically. Absolutely, I completely agree with you. Sanchez did make it very awkward in there, unfortunately. Mirador actually caught him with an overhand kind of... It was more of like his palm or like the inside of his wrist that caught him on the back of the head, back of the ear, just took away the equilibrium and really had him dancing a little bit out there, which was naturally the source of a lot of memes last night as well, and will be for future reference, because it's always funny when people get knocked out or get knocked down or TKO'd or whatever in spectacular fashion. And of course, we'll get to the main event in a minute, but just the positioning of Conor McGregor when he did get TKO'd, it is already all over social media, with him laying down and him getting, slept by Bernie Sanders and all kinds of stuff. It was absolutely crazy. But nevertheless, we had an absolutely fantastic women's fight as well with Jojo Calderwood and Jessica Eye, who subsequently had a lot of issues with her eye. She was taking a lot of damage to one particular, I believe it was her left eye. She was just getting caught with a lot of jabs on the way in, and she started to bleed a little bit as well. But I thought Jojo Calderwood did absolutely fantastically. She was really, really mixing up her shots. She was throwing kicks, knees, elbows, clinching, really good Thai clinch work as well. Prath, what did you see from the women? Obviously, you had Jojo Calderwood going into this fight.
Yeah, the clinching positions, I think, were the things that really, really stood out for me in the fight. Her defense was fantastic. Her reversals were fantastic as well. Doing damage on the exits as well, I think, got her a lot of points in the long scheme of the fight. But it was a grinding, tough, typical Jessica Eye fight. And I think anyone really in that 125 division that can get through that storm and can get the W there is a real. It shows that you're really, really up there. It shows that you're ready to compete with those grinders at the top. Not necessarily meaning Valentina. Obviously, you've got a lot of other people like Jennifer Meyer at the top of that division, who are quite often grapplers and grinders. And I think Jessica Eye is a really good test for her to take that next step. I don't think she fights Maya because she did lose by submission to Maya before. So Maya got the title shot that Jojo Calderwood was originally going to get. And again, I think I made this point on the pre-fight breakdown: is that really a prize at the end of the day, getting pushed up the division to eventually fight the boogie woman of that division, which is Valentina? I mean, I don't think so, but she did amazing in that fight. Would love to see her go forward and take maybe number 1, number 2, number 3 ranked fighter, and let's get her in that title picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just goes to prove what you said a minute ago about the evolution of women's MMA. Obviously, quite a lot of people were sleeping during this point, trying to catch a little break, especially the European fans. And this was around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. It was tough to stay up for that, but I felt that there was a lot of action throughout that fight. A lot of action. Naturally, we all stayed up for it because we're pretty hardcore like that. George had his little nap beforehand, but I did a full stretch and went straight through, and I was very, very enticed by the fights, and especially the women's fights. The women's fights did really, really well. And then obviously that brings us to our co-main, which was basically, I think, 2.5 minutes of Dan Hooker doing lots of sidesteps, trying to evade Michael Chandler. And then I think even at one point, Chandler got a little bit annoyed and kind of like shook his arms down, trying to taunt Hooker, and didn't really know what to do. I don't think Hooker got any shots off at all. It was a very strange fight, and not a fight that we were expecting at all. We were all expecting an absolute bloodbath. We were expecting a war, but naturally we haven't seen Chandler fighting on this kind of platform and against this caliber of opponent as well. So I was very, very impressed. Naturally, going into this fight, I was leaning more towards Dan Hooker after his previous war with Dustin Poirier, and he did very, very well. But it was just a complete one-sided onslaught from Michael Chandler, and it really, really puts him in this lightweight tournament and in contention, which we will obviously discuss in a minute about the options that there are at lightweight now. But George, what did you see, man? I mean, I was completely glued for the 2.5 minutes that they were dancing.
Yeah, definitely. And Michael Chandler has really announced himself. He's a serious player now, like a real serious player. And all I can think of is, how hard does Michael Chandler hit? Because Hooker took some punches against Paul Felder and Dustin Poirier, and he withstood them all. So he got hit once by Chandler, and that was good night. So he must hit like a freight train. So yeah, I thought Dan Hooker looked lost in there. He looked like he didn't want to really be there. He looked really unprepared, which he didn't look like prior to getting inside the octagon. He looked really good and ready to go. But as soon as the kind of klaxon went, he looked all over the place. He just didn't look like... He reminded me of Gerald Meerschaert when he fought Chimaev. He kind of just danced around for a bit and then just got hit, and it was like over. And I was just like, what? But I think all the talk, to be fair, has to be about Michael Chandler. Like I certainly doubted him. I didn't think that he could maybe come into this division and into the Shark Tank and really make a play at it. But clearly the guy's legit. Clearly this guy, and it's such a shame that he hasn't come over a couple of years earlier, because if he had done, man, who knows where he'd be. But he's here now, and he's certainly part of this lightweight tournament into the semi-finals, and he's going to make a serious play at this in 2021. But yeah, incredible performance. He stalked Hooker for that 2.5 minutes, and when he found the opportunity, he went in for the kill. And when he went in for the kill, there was no stopping him, and Hooker was gone. So yeah, incredible for Michael Chandler. Not expecting it, but absolutely brilliant. So yeah, fair play to him, and yeah, welcome to the UFC. Welcome to the big time.
Yeah, I've just got the stats here, and he threw 24 strikes and he landed 17 of them. So it was, obviously probably quite a grueling camp, and obviously quite a lot of pressure coming into the UFC to then throw less than 20 shots and to get the W and probably make a decent payday as well. Obviously it's for these guys, the idea, they don't get paid overtime, and they've always made it very clear that they don't get paid overtime. So it's like, why not just get in there and get it done super quick? Because it's money for nothing. If you work out the amount that they're getting paid per second, it's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Prath, what did you think about his very WWE kind of professional wrestling approach to his call outs at the end? For me, it was a little bit cheesy. It was a little bit subpar. It was a little bit Bellator for me, which is obviously just a caliber underneath the UFC for me personally. But what did you think of his call-outs, which included absolutely everyone?
So just a couple of things I want to touch on the fight itself. The overhand left that finished the fight was money, and he hit it perfectly, set it up perfectly with the body shots, littering him with the body shots throughout that time. Dan Hooker obviously fighting on the outside of the two black lines of the octagon, constantly moving around. And just, I think Michael Chandler's shot selection was impressive as well. Wasn't wasting his energy, throwing ridiculous shots for no reason. As you mentioned, was it 20 shots, 17 of them landed. You can tell that he's picking very, very calculated shots to hit him with. And the other thing that I just wanted to touch on was, man, poor Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker now having to quarantine in Abu Dhabi for over a month now before going home. Poor guy. I got to say, one of the things that really stood out to me yesterday, and it's sad to talk about, I think Dan Hooker after that Poirier fight and the Felder fight, I really do feel like those kind of wars have taken a little piece away from Dan Hooker, and that's what I kind of felt. And I got it when you mentioned, George, Edward Chimaev. That is not Edward Chimaev, Chimaev versus Meerschaert. That's exactly what I thought of as well. Almost looked like he didn't want to be in there. Looked kind of like he didn't want to engage. He didn't want to throw any knees. He looked like he wanted to feint the knees, but he didn't want to actually throw anything. So really bizarre, interesting fight. But let's talk about the call out. So I don't know if you guys know, but that's actually a very famous promo from old school pro wrestling, WWF. Ric Flair, who came over from WCW, who was the champion over in WCW, came over to WWF and he was the champion. And that was the kind of similar promo that he cut when he came over as well. I think there was a few lines missing there from there. But I think in the age that we're living in now, I think pre-2014, when Conor was on his rise, it would have been cringy. It would have been awful. I think him, the Henry Cejudo gimmick, I think all of that kind of stuff pre-2014 just does not resonate with anyone. But now we're living in the age of social media. We're living in the age of almost gimmicks for these fighters. They come onto the press conference and they have a gimmick. They come into the fight and they have a gimmick, and then they come out of there. They put their gimmick to one side and then they carry on being a human being. Colby Covington, for instance, is one of those people. And I think there's a lot of translation between pro wrestling and mixed martial arts. If you look into the early days of pro wrestling, I feel like there is a lot of similarities, and the way that MMA has evolved over the last couple of years, especially since that 2014 time, a lot more of it can be incorporated, not necessarily the actual wrestling moves in the ring, but I think a lot of the politics and a lot of the in-ring stuff on the microphone has really, really helped elevate some of these guys in mixed martial arts. And I think it's really allowed them to open themselves up to a different fan base. You know, you have someone that's like Colby Covington, who's very polarizing, but then you have people that can do it in a good way, like Chandler, and do it in a convincing way that makes you feel what he's saying behind it. I felt every single word, felt every single name that he called out. And I think after a performance like that, that was the only promo that he could cut. He needed to show the world that he wanted everyone and he's aggressive and he's going to go for it. And I think he really got that point across. I love the fact that he obviously slotted in a 1992 Ric Flair promo that, as a pro wrestling fan, that really resonates with me. But I think the most important thing is the names he called out, the aggressiveness of it. And I think even if he doesn't get an insane title fight in the next one, he is only ever going to get those top 1, 2, 3 opponents in the lightweight division. And I think he's going to continue. And I think he's going to be a massive star as well. I think that's the other thing. During the fight, they were chanting Michael Chandler, which was crazy to me because that was his first fight there. And they were chanting for him when he was the one that was doing the, when he was putting the pressure on and doing that. So I think Chandler is going to be a great pay-per-view star for the UFC in the time where they're obviously thirsting for a lot of pay-per-view stars. Khabib gone now. Conor probably going to take a break here for a little bit. So I think let's strap the rocket ship to him. How can you have a better performance? And, you know, they were sitting there discussing at the post-fight press conference, was that the greatest debut? And, you know, people were saying Anderson, and there are a couple. I can't think of many off the top of my head, but I would say that is definitely, in terms of the Bellator guys at least coming over to the UFC, that was easily the best performance out of any of those guys. And that includes the Alvarez winning over RDA. I thought that was an amazing performance. But, man, Michael Chandler shut Dan Hooker down. And we all believed that Dan Hooker was going to get the knee. He was going to put the pressure on and get that win. Man, he proved us all wrong. I actually screamed at 5 a.m. because I was not expecting it. My housemate thought there was a fox outside. So that just kind of shows you the level of excitement that I had. So really looking forward to seeing what they do with him.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was a crazy fight for however long it lasted, and it didn't seem like it lasted for very long at all. But like you say, it was cool for him to do that kind of like cheesy promo. Obviously, he did a backflip as well, which off the top of the cage, which Dana really did not like. Obviously, we see Justin Gaethje do it and stuff like that, and people have their little celebratory kind of moves that they have. Obviously, Demetrius Johnson used to do his little one leg flip around the octagon as well, and various different people. Johnny Walker broke his shoulder trying to do the worm after he won, or dislocated his shoulder. So it's like, why are you risking your body so much? And the octagon is what, like 7 foot high or something, 6.5 foot high. It is no scrub jumping off of that, and you just think the damage that you could cause and the implementation of having to sit out for such a long time. Like, you could be out for months from jumping off the cage. There's just no need for it. I thought that was a little bit cheesy and a little bit kind of, I didn't need to see it. Do you know what I mean? Fair play to the win. The call out was cool, exactly like you say. It took a lot of people back to the pro wrestling days. But what did you think of the backflip, George? Do you think it's necessary?
Hey, well, he'll be doing it with his next opponent. Him and Gaichi will be backflipping off the top of the octagon at the same time, probably, as they're getting introduced by Bruce Buffer. So I presume that that's where I think he's heading next anyway, Michael Chandler.
Adrenaline is a hell of a drug.
Yeah, I think he's on a collision course for Justin Gaethje.
Yeah, absolutely. But then Justin Gaethje obviously is coming off of a loss, I believe. Who did? No, Gaethje fought Ferguson. No,
Khabib.
Oh, okay. I'm miles away here. That whole lightweight division is just, everyone's fighting everyone and everyone wants to fight everyone or already has. It's just all over the place. And obviously that takes us right up to the main event, the main course of the evening. Fair play to Prath. You called it. You said El Diamante is going to take it. And naturally he did in spectacular fashion. Not many people go in there and perform the way that Dustin did against someone like Conor McGregor, especially the hype surrounding it. All of the promos were all leaning towards Conor the whole time. Dustin got booed on the way out to the octagon, which he said in the post-fight presser that it was something new to him as well. I don't think anyone should get booed. This is why I said I'm not a massive fan of crowds, because when we don't have the crowd, we have the apex, you have the cornerman. They'll give them a little clap on the way in. They'll make a bit of noise. Cool. Everyone gets the same treatment. But then when you're booing someone, I just think it's disrespectful to the sport, and it's disrespectful to the people that put so much work into this. But then he caught the W anyway, and then naturally there was a little bit of silence afterwards, and then everyone changed their tune and was all well on board with it, But I felt that Dustin just completely destroyed his leg. As we know, he completely had a fantastic game plan in there. He destroyed the leg, which afterwards Conor was talking about, and he was like he'd never been leg kicked before. He'd never, had anyone ever kick his leg, but he hasn't had any octagon time. That's the thing. When you finish guys in the first round, or you go slugfest with Nate Diaz and stuff like that, and grappling matches with Nate Diaz and with Khabib and stuff like that, you don't get leg kicks. You're just not getting hit by them. But Dustin managed the distance fantastically. He caught him with some beautiful shots. Naturally, Conor's leg was completely destroyed very, very early on, which completely reduced his movement. And obviously that is such a big part of Conor's game plan, is the movement. But Prath, what did you see? Give me a little breakdown of what you saw, and then we'll move over to George, and we can all just have a little feast on this absolute masterpiece that Dustin put on instead of the masterpiece that Conor put on.
The masterpiece that Conor was supposed to put on.
Exactly.
Man. I thought that Poirier was going to win a decision. I did not see him winning by TKO, but I should have. And the reason why I say I should have is because of the exact same thing that I was talking about in the pre-fight breakdown, which was that the reps for Poirier, I think, is so important. Conor coming in once a year and fighting just does not give him that same acumen that Dustin Poirier has. And I think he learns a lot from these fights. And I think that's one of the things that makes me so happy that Dustin has won this, is because of his improvements over the years. You can just see it time and time again implemented in all these fights. If you look at the last couple of people that Dustin fought outside of Khabib, he fought Gaichi and he fought Hooker, who both kicked the hell out of his leg. And I think that's a learning curve, right? You get your leg kicked in certain places, and to kick a person in those certain places. And I think that's exactly what he did there. And that's exactly what Conor was kind of saying. He was saying like he was defending the kick, but he was getting the soft part of the thigh or the soft part of the calf, sorry. And he didn't experience that. I remember Dustin after the Hooker fight said that Hooker was doing a lot of shin on shin leg kicks, which is very unprecedented. Like normally you kick the soft part of the leg, try and make it tender, and then kind of that will limit their movement. But for someone to go shin on shin, I think again that teaches you so much about that particular discipline of the fight, the leg kicks. And I think it's a very, very underrated thing. And as you continue to see over the years, leg kicks get more and more implemented. You see guys like Edson Barbosa win TKOs with those. It's one of the most dangerous weapons out in there, and you're throwing it at the head. You're throwing it at the legs, and they take as much damage as each other. But I mean, so that alone was crazy. I think his composure in there was incredible. Taking a lot of those shots in the first round, coming back from that as well, and taking the time to kind of almost eat those shots in. Like take the shots, take a second. Now I'm going to go forward again. And I think those that really, really changed the dynamic of the fight. I think Conor obviously is just expecting himself to just move forward and unload shot after shot. And if he was seeing that Poirier was taking the shots, but also composing himself and coming back with counters, his distance management was incredible. And I think Conor also had incredible distance management as well, and was piecing up a lot of Poirier in that first round, especially when they were away from each other. In the clinch positions, Conor was able to reverse and get the position on Poirier, and saying after the fight that he felt way stronger than Poirier, and that if he fought him again, he would maybe take a grappling based approach to it, which is crazy. Imagine Conor McGregor going for a grappling based fight against someone. But I think that really shows how much respect he has now for Dustin's hands. And I think everybody should have respect for Dustin's hands. One of the great guys in this business, and one of the guys that you really want to see do well. And I actually hate picking against Dustin Poirier so much because of how much he means to the MMA community, but also to the Louisiana community that he supports and raises money for. So, man, one of the, violent night, amazing finishes from both the main and the co-main, but the respect on both sides afterwards was incredible to watch. Man, and and my last thing before I hand it over to you guys, the finish, incredible. The combinations, the right hand that started the combination, then just unloaded with hooks, hook after hook after hook. Got him stumbling backwards and then hit him with a beautiful like hook, uppercut, shovel punch, square on the chin, dropped him, and just Dustin's a finisher, man. When he knows there's blood in the water, he will go after the finish. And he even said afterwards, he was like, I think I maybe went a little bit too much after the finish, but still got it in the end. So I was really happy to see him. And the other thing that I really loved is his wife afterwards, when she pointed into the cage, and they were both had that moment where they pointed at each other, and she said, no one's going to doubt my husband again. And I think that is the truth. No one should ever doubt Dustin Poirier again.
Absolutely, completely. And exactly like you say about the leg kicks and stuff like that, and it being a very, very, it shouldn't be a new technique. I can imagine if you went back 10 years ago and said all of these to MMA fighters and UFC fighters, right, let's start kicking down the legs, because if you want to chop a tree down, you start at the base. You don't start cutting off the leaves at the top. It doesn't work like that. I can't remember which boxer said it, but they said, you want to cut a tree down, you go for the base. So you chop them down from the body, you chop them down from the legs, instead of always headhunting. And maybe Conor needs to spend a little time over in Tiger Muay Thai or over in Thailand, working on his Muay Thai, working on strengthening his shins. Those guys over there, they're literally kicking down bamboo sticks and kicking down tree trunks all day long. They have got shins of steel, shins of absolute steel. And, he's probably got very soft legs because they've never had to take too much of a beating. George, what did you see? How excited were you? Because obviously we were all texting each other very, very early hours of the morning, and there was a lot of swear words involved we're not going to mention now, but we were just all in complete disarray of what had just happened. How did you see it?
Yeah, I was definitely shocked. I wasn't expecting it. I was obviously fully aboard McGregor winning this, and so humble pie has been eaten. But the first thing I want to say is that nobody takes a loss as well as Conor McGregor does. He's super respectful. He always congratulates his opponent, and he always goes away and says, I've got things to work on and I've got things to do, but I'll come back stronger because of it. And I don't think he gets enough credit for that, Conor McGregor, at times, that he's man enough and human enough to go, do you know what? I got beaten by a better man tonight. And so I just thought that had to be said about Conor McGregor. But Dustin Poirier had a pretty ingenious game plan. Mike Brown at ATT nailed it, which not many people have done before. And when you think about it, it's pretty obvious. Conor McGregor's power comes from the fact he puts a lot of that weight on that front leg. And so when he catches you, it's because he's got his power on that. If you eliminate the power from that car, when he can't stand properly, instantly you're taking away his biggest weapon. And clearly Mike Brown and Dustin Poirier worked that out pretty damn quickly, and it worked a treat. It was perfect. You could see it after Conor McGregor won the first round for me, but you could see as he was walking back, his leg was gone. Like it was already busted to pieces, and Poirier knew it, and he came back out, and it happened again, and there it was. He could barely stand. The finish came in, and it was game over. But you could see, all you could see was that leg like getting bigger and getting more and more red, and you're just like, oh no, this is a massive problem for McGregor here. They found the weak point, and he couldn't take it. But fair play to Poirier. Maybe I've been at times a doubter of Poirier, and I think a lot of the MMA community potentially fall foul of that. They kind of just dismiss him out of hand at times, but dismiss him no more. And he will fight for lightweight gold now. And good luck to him against Charlie Olives.
No, absolutely. And what I was going to say about Dustin, obviously he had a fantastic performance in there, but there was little glimmers of Conor McGregor that I saw where he was obviously, his hips were very, very far set back on his stance. His head was very, very far forward, obviously. And it kind of, Dustin got thrown off by the range and by the distance that Conor was portraying, but he wised to it very, very quickly, and he moved in, and Dustin's strange high guard with his high elbows that he was kind of putting on were deflecting a lot of shots from Conor as well. Naturally, Conor did catch him a couple of times, but it was nowhere near what we all expected and what the MMA community thought was going to happen.
There was one punch. I can't remember what round. If it was in the first, second round, where McGregor caught Poirier, and it definitely hurt him. He kind of like, he took a moment, was like, Christ, that hurts. But it was obviously, as we've discussed loads of times now, Poirier has become a lot better at coping with difficult moments, and perhaps a few years ago, Poirier might have folded in that moment, but was kind of able to kind of relax himself down and go, right, it's okay, I can take it, and let's carry on. But there was definitely a moment, I can't remember when it was, but McGregor did catch him at one point. I was like, oh, hang on. And then, but like I said, that calf, man, that was so busted up.
Yeah, I thought he looked a little bit tired as well. He looked a little bit tired. Yeah. Sorry, Prath. He looked a little bit tired after the wrestling exchanges in the first round. Obviously trying to keep Dustin Poirier, who's an absolute beast, trying to keep him pressed up against the side of the octagon as well. I thought Conor McGregor when he walked back to the corner between rounds, he looked, obviously his leg was compromised, but he did look a little bit tired. He looked a little bit fatigued. So this whole myth of Conor not having a fantastic gas tank, it looked pretty evident that his gas tank obviously wasn't very good. Maybe he didn't prepare for a 5-round slugfest. Maybe his own words pre-fight was that he was going to get Dustin out of there very early on, and then post-fight he said, "I need more time in the octagon." So it was just, he was obviously going very confident going in there, and then obviously he ate his own humble pie coming out. Prath, what did you have?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that I just think Dustin is one of those guys, and I think that one of the biggest improvements that Dustin's had since the Michael Johnson fight and the Conor fight before that, those two big losses, is that his ability to adjust as the fight goes on is incredible and should be spoken of as one of his higher qualities. His ability to adjust on the distance from Conor. I actually thought they both looked quite tired going out of the second round to the stall, but I think Dustin recovered a little bit better. And I think, I just think he could see that Conor was compromised, whether it was the leg or whether it was fatigue or whether it was that he felt like he was getting good shots off on him. the adjustments were key. The adjustments were there from round 1 to 2. And I think when you have tangible differences between round 1 and 2, that you can see that they've gone back to their corner, they've listened to their corner, they've come out in the second round and they've made those adjustments. That is exactly why Dustin Poirier is number 2, number 1, and almost probably, and should be the lightweight champion right now.
Yeah, completely. And that obviously brings us to where do we go from here? I've just got the rankings up in front of me now. We've got obviously Khabib is the lightweight champion, which I'm not sure what's going to happen there. I believe Dana said afterwards that Khabib is probably not going to come back. None of these guys are going to be fighting for any sort of in the next kind of couple of months anyway, apart from perhaps Charles Oliveira, maybe Justin Gaichi. Poirier obviously just fought last night. Tony Ferguson took a big L recently. I know Rafael dos Anjos called out Conor yesterday and said he's going to retire Conor with leg kicks. So this whole division from kind of Paul Felder all the way up to the champ is just completely stacked. Now, George, where do you see Conor going next? And then Prath, I'm going to ask you where Poirier is going. So you can have a little think about where you think he's going and who he's going to be fighting. And, you know, obviously we were talking last night about who's going to be fighting who. But there's just so many question marks around it. Obviously, Dustin's going to be fighting for gold next, but who's that going to be against if Khabib vacates the title? But George, where do you see Conor going next?
Okay, as a picture as a whole, Khabib's gone. Dana didn't say it last night still, but Khabib's gone. So at some point, we are going to get told that Khabib's vacated the title and he's out of the picture. So that's the first thing. Conor, to start off with, I think Conor is going to have a fight booked with Tony Ferguson. And then I think, if I go with the other guys as well, I think Dan Hooker will fight RDA. And I think it's going to be Michael Chandler, Justin Gaichi. And I think when Khabib announces that he's going to walk away, they'll book Dustin Poirier versus Charles Oliveira for undisputed gold in that lightweight division. That's how I see it planning out over the next 4 months. I guess this will all play out over probably. But yeah, Conor, if I talk about Conor specifically, I'm going to go for Tony Ferguson.
Yeah, no, completely. And obviously, it would be a strange stylistic matchup for him because Tony Ferguson is a very... his gas tank is huge and his heart is huge as well going into fights, and he does not back down. His volume is massive. But I think that would be a great fight for Conor McGregor as well, because he's going to have to fight someone, and he's going to have to fight someone in the top 10 because Dana's not going to give him anyone outside the top 10.
And definitely, like, obviously, I said to you guys last night, it looks very likely that Manny Pacquiao's fighting Ryan Garcia in boxing. That gives the hint that McGregor is going to be hanging around in the UFC for a little while yet. And I think his press conference afterwards gave the suggestion that he's quite keen to come back relatively quite quickly. And so I think that we'll see McGregor inside the octagon before the end of May this year.
Yeah, I
Probably.
mean, completely. Like, if we just look outside of the top 10, you've obviously got Beneil Dariush, who's on quite a good run as well. But I don't see Conor McGregor fighting one of these guys. You know, we've got Islam Makhachev. I don't see him fighting one of these guys because it's just there's too much risk for not enough reward, and he's not going to be fighting someone outside the top 10. For Conor especially, because he wants to have his highlight reel. He wants to be fighting for... He's going to be on pay-per-views. Dana's always going to want to put him on pay-per-views, and he's going to want to scrape the money out of him, you know? Prath, what do you see happening? Obviously, George sees Tony Ferguson. He sees RDA, Oliveira. Yeah. Where do you see this going? And obviously now we've got Chandler in the mix. Chandler's going to be ranked so highly as well over a win against Dan Hooker, who's currently number 6. He's going to slide straight in above Conor McGregor, who's just taken the L. So he's going to come in at either 2 or 3.
Wow, that must be one of the biggest leaps in a division outside. Like, the only other one I can think of that could happen is Leon Hamzat. That's the only other one I can think of that's like such a disparity in the rate in the rankings. Wow, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, number 6, Conor's number 5. So I mean, that just makes sense that he would be in that 3rd or 4th slot there. Wow. Okay. And you know what? The other thing as well, I was just thinking in my head, as you said, Islam Makhachev, I was just like, Conor might be tempted into an Islam fight as a way of getting to, hey, let me just like push the Khabib buttons a little bit and go through Islam to maybe try and get to Khabib. Maybe they do that in Russia when the world opens Who knows? Who knows? Crazier things have happened in the UFC, and I think that's something that we could all agree on. That any of these fights, even the ones that we feel like are the right matchups, will probably not happen, and it will probably be some weird mix of, Michael Chandler versus Kevin Lee out of nowhere. It will just appear, and then that'll be the fight. And okay, we'll go with it then. And so, for me, what I would love to see is, I agree. I think I would like to see Conor fight either Tony Ferguson or Paul Felder, both coming off of losses. And I think that's a really good rebound fight for all three of those individuals involved as well. So Conor, Paul Felder, and Tony Ferguson is a great bounce back for either three of these people to take against each other. I think obviously match someone else, match the other person who doesn't get that fight with maybe the person that's ranked below that person. And so that's for the Conor fight. For Poirier, I would love to see personally, and I think maybe I'm just a little bit drunk off the hype here, but I would love to see Poirier versus Chandler. And I know that Poirier in the post-fight press yesterday was saying that, Chandler was good, but he maybe didn't want to take that fight with Chandler. And I think that's maybe because he feels like he hasn't really earned his spot. Whereas if you look at Poirier, he's gone through pretty much every single person in that top 10 division. Whether it's a win or a loss, like he's actually fought all of these guys. And I think he may be a little bit warranted in feeling that way. And I think Dana's going to have to do some convincing to get Dustin to take that fight. But I do think overall from the fans, and obviously from what the fans want, and I think also from, the perspective that they just both fought on the same card, and timing wise that works out, is Poirier versus Chandler. I think Poirier versus Chandler for the title next is a good shout. I do love Charles Oliveira, and I think Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaichi actually kind of, in a way, supersedes the UFC lightweight title and becomes the UFC violent weight title. And I think those two are incredibly violent, and I think that would be an incredible fight to watch. Whether there's a title on the line, I don't think it even matters, because those two bring the fire. And I think that is going to be one of those chaos fights. That's going to be a pick'em, and that's going to have the butterflies, the anxiety that we had yesterday as Conor was walking into that octagon. I feel like that's going to be one of those fights. So that's Chandler against Poirier, Oliveira against Justin, Conor against either Ferguson or Felder. Man, I love both Ferguson and Felder. And do you know what the other thing as well? I really like Tony Ferguson versus Paul Felder. I think that's also a great fight that could be made in that position as well. So, man, any number of these fights can be made, but those are the ones that I'm really looking at.
Yeah,
just quickly,
if Conor fights Paul Felder, it will be a true Irishman versus an Irish dragon. And obviously they had a little bit of beef on social media as well, saying you're not even Irish. And Paul Felder came out and said, I know I'm not Irish. He said, I don't even like the nickname. Sorry, George, go on.
I was just going to say that I don't doubt that Dana might want to book Michael Chandler because of potential pay-per-view numbers, all this kind of stuff. But a guy who's on an 8-fight win streak, who many feel is probably the next guy to win that belt, I just don't see how you can deny him that. The only other one I was going to say was none of us have mentioned it yet. What about Conor McGregor versus Dan Hooker?
Yeah, absolutely. I was literally looking at the rankings, thinking all of these guys, losers fighting losers, winners fighting winners, and stuff. Completely. And I think, but that would be a terrible stylistic matchup for Conor. Such a long, awkward guy. I don't know. As a fan of Conor McGregor, I don't want to see him take another loss. So I want to see him. I want to see him fight Kevin Lee or Ally Quinta, and then just go from there. Hey
man, put some respect on Kevin Lee's name. Put some respect on Kevin Lee's name.
But he doesn't even know what division he's in. He's moving up to 170. He's down at 155. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's getting tattoos on the back of his head. He's all over the place.
It's a pretty sweet tattoo, though. You got to say. You got to admit.
Don't go to 170. Chimaev's there. That would be a disaster.
No, it would be completely. Well, it has been absolutely fantastic breaking the fights down with you guys. Obviously, there is no UFC card next weekend, I believe, which is going to be a welcome break for us. We will still be doing a show. We're going to come up with some topics that we're going to be speaking about. And then after that, I believe the next one, the first fight card in February will be Overeem versus Volkov, which will be fantastic. I'm a massive fan of Overeem, so it will be good to see him make a run for title contention again, although I believe he might have just missed the mark on it. As always, if you've enjoyed the show, drop us a like, drop us a comment, subscribe, share it to your friends, share it to your nan's brother's cousin, I don't mind. And boys, thank you very much for joining me on the show. As always, we will be back next week with another one. Thank you very much. Peace.